Hello and welcome to another training video, and welcome to another video in the series on pivot tables. Now in this video we're going to look at different ways of aggregating or summarizing our data. And when I say aggregating, normally when we summarize our data we do it by a numeric field and we have a choice. So by summarizing I might want to see all of the ones which are Toyota, but I want to aggregate these fields together by, rather than seeing all of the data, what I want is just to add together all of the ones which are Toyota. Now in a table what we can do is we can simply apply a filter and filter to see just Toyota, and then at the base of the table we could have a formula which adds them together. So this is a subtotal which is the sum aggregation of the price. Now I can do that, see that as a drop down as sum of all of these values. Now the reason I can do that is because these values are numerics. Now if I tried to do sum in this column it wouldn't work because these are text values. Now equally there are some columns which contain numbers, but they're not something I would want to sum. Now the reason here, these although they are numbers, they are sales numbers, not a number, a quantity of sales. This is the number attributed to the sale, something like an invoice number. So therefore I would not want to aggregate sum of these individual sales. What I might want to do is count them and see how many sales there were, but I certainly don't want to apply a sum to them. Now at the moment these are data type general, which means the computer has analysed them and looked at them and said they look like numbers, therefore I'm going to treat them like numbers. And so I could actually do a sum on these, but like I'm saying, I wouldn't want to because it would give me an erroneous value. I could get round this by saying, actually, although these they look like numbers, I'm going to tell you that they are text. And you'll notice how the machine has now formatted them to the left of the cell, whereas the numbers remain formatted to the right of the cell. And these hours of the day are also formatted on the left of the cell rather than the right of the cell. So these are also treated as text. So in this particular set of data, the only field that I would aggregate by would be my price. But I have a choice of how I would aggregate. Do I want to aggregate by sum, or do I want to do it by average? Do I want to do it by count? Do I want to do it by the maximum, by the minimum, or various other options to do with variance and standard deviations? I'm going to leave that at sum, and we can look at this and say 100,000, just over 100,000 for Toyota. Now, if I wanted to filter that further, what I could do is say, well, let's also filter it by the month of January. So now I'm seeing 41,800 for January and Toyota. So let's have a look and see how we would do this in our pivot table. So if I go back to my pivot table, if I went to January and Toyota, well, that's already there. The number sum of price filtered by January and filtered by Toyota. Now what we call this is the value field, and it's given me the sum of price, which is what it tells me up here, but this has had two context filters applied to it. So it has a row context filter, which is Toyota, and it has a column context filter, which is January. So the columns are from here and my rows are from here. Now again, I can simply right click on this value, and the choices I make here will apply to all of my value field settings. And if I say show or summarize values by a count of them, it will tell me how many sales were made. Now this has still got the formatting of currency, so I could right click number format and change this to numbers, and I no longer have the currency on there. Now I can see how many sales were made of each different type of make in each different month. I'm just going to undo a couple of steps there. I could also see these as any of these others, So any of these other operations here, and bearing in mind which one has been chosen, so here I've chosen sum, I can now also choose to see these values with another calculation applied on top of them. So for example, I might want to see what these individual numbers are as a percentage of my overall grand total. So this will be, what is my BMW January figure compared to my overall total for all models and all months. So if I right click and I show values as percentage of grand total, and now I see that overall that was 4.5% of my total figures for all months, which is pretty good. Let's just go back, so Control Z and right click and have a look at another one of these show values as percentage of column total. Now what this is showing me is what that figure is, rather than as a percentage of this one, but as a percentage of all of my January sales. So my BMW was 13.5 or just under 14% of my January sales. Again, Control Z. Perhaps I wanted to see what the January figures for BMW were compared to February, compared to March, but just compared for the BMW figures. So this time I want to see them as a percentage of my row total. Right click, show values as percentage of row total. And there we have it. Now, when you just have all these 100%, they become what we call clutter. In other words, they're not necessary, and you're advised to actually get rid of them. So we easily do that from design, grand totals, and I'm just going to show them for the columns only, and that turns them off for the rows. So, and you would have done the other way around, so turn off the column totals, so you would just show them for rows only. In the previous example, we're seeing these as percentage of the row total. I'm going to undo a couple of steps and right click, show values as. Now here where we have parent totals, what these are is if I actually have compound selections, so I have multiples in here, then what I could be seeing is my grand total for Belinda and what is this number here as a fraction of my grand total for Belinda. Now at the moment I don't have these subtotals showing, but if I show the subtotals, there's Belinda's totals, that's her grand total. And now if I right click there and show values as percentage of the parent total, then that's working it out for my parent is my base field, salesperson. And this one is now as a percentage of Belinda's totals. Okay, and the others work the same for that. Now, if I take out the parent, this is now coming up with an NA error because I've told it to divide by the parent field, but the parent field no longer exists. So I'm simply going to go here and show values as, and I'm just choose a different one. So this is the difference from. So whatever I had in here, I want to see what the difference is between my January and February figures. So I'm going to have my base field as the month, and I want to see it as a difference from the previous month. Now this is going to give me empty in January because I don't have a previous month, but my February figures will show me what the difference in February is from what my January sales were. So now I'm seeing my February figure there, which is the difference from January and February. My March figure is my March minus my February. My grand totals don't exist anymore because these are not actual figures that I would add up. So once more, I would go into design and grand totals and have them on for columns only. Okay, let me just right click here and I'll show values as, and I'm just going to go back to no calculation, and at any time you can do that to switch back to your normal default view. Now the thing to bear in mind whenever you're doing this is all of these calculations are based on however I've got my values showing. So the aggregation method will actually change what these values appear as. So if I were to see these as a count, so summarised by count or average, it'll be giving me very different numbers to if I'm showing them by the sum. So make sure that you're actually showing it in the right way, the way that you want to summarise. Let's have a look at some others. So we've gone to difference from. Percentage difference from is fairly self-explanatory. Running totals. Now a lot of people don't quite know what running totals are, but the simplest way is to think of them like your bank account. So for example, if I'd earned 43,800 in January and spent nothing, and then in February I'd earned another 34,499 and spent nothing, my total bank account at the end of February would be what I'd earned in January plus what I earned in February. So what I have at the end of March would actually be my January, February, March figures added together, which in this case would be the same as my grand total. So my 220,639 would be my value of my running total at the end of March. And once more my grand totals will disappear. So if I right click, show values as running total in, now you generally want these to be in a period of time. So in the months, and I click OK. My January figure stays the same because it's January plus nothing. My February figure has increased to be January plus February. My March figure has increased to be January, February, March, which is the same as what my grand totals were. And once more, I can turn off the totals there, so I don't need the clutter showing, and we just see our running totals. Now when you do use running totals, it's important to make this obvious, so maybe put a note or some kind of text there to let people know that these are running totals and this was not my magic figure for March, which was fantastically high for whatever reason. Bear in mind, people will be used to seeing whatever is the default. So I'm just going to go back on that one, show values as no calculation, and turn back on my totals. Now again, I can go into show values as, and now this time what I can do is I can rank them. So I could rank these figures, and I'm going to say rank largest to smallest, and I'm going to do this by the month field. Now what this will do is it will rank each of the makes, comparing themselves to each other within those 3 months. Now if you look at this one here for BMW, we'll see that the biggest is March, so that's going to get a ranking of number 1. My next is January, that'll be ranked number 2. My next is February, that'll be ranked number 3. And that's exactly what it will do. It does something different when I have the zeros in there, because this will be ranked number 1, and these won't have rankings because they don't have any values. So I click OK, and that's exactly what it's done. My March figure has ranked 1, my January number 2, my February number 3, and here I have a number 1 and nothing, nothing. Once more, I could turn off my grand totals. Now I've just done Control Z to undo. There's one more I want to show you here, and this is show values as, and I have something called index. Now this is quite complex to understand, but effectively what it does is it gives every single one of these values a weighting. Now it's the weighting to show me how important that figure there for January BMW was, not only compared to itself in February and March, but also compared to all of the other figures in January. So this is actually quite powerful, but also quite surprising because it applies a weighting value to them. And so my largest overall sale might not be the biggest ranked number. So my largest overall sale is actually my BMW in March, but because this figure here is so much bigger than those two figures there, it's actually going to get a higher ranking, because the performance for Nissan in March was so good compared to Nissan in January and February that this might be of a significant weighting. So let's have a go at doing that. So I'll right click, show values as index, and you're seeing exactly that. So let me take that, my figure there is 1.3, which is significantly higher than those two, but my figure down here is actually 1.6 because it is so much higher than these two here. And my figure here is actually 3, which is the highest of all, again because it is so much bigger than the two which are 0. In the next video, we're going to take a look at how we can join together data sources and tables and start to use them combined to make a single pivot table. And this is referred to as power pivot, and also using the data model. So I'll see you on the next video. If you have found it useful, don't forget to like and subscribe down below. And once more, thank you for listening.